Hi, everyone. It's Alex Savage from KTVU, Fox 2 News here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And really, just in a matter of a few weeks, a lot of school age children all across the country will potentially be returning to their classrooms, their physical school buildings here, despite the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Districts all over putting plans in place to get kids back in class. And joining us now to talk more about how this is all going to play out is Dr. Hansa Bhargava, who is a pediatrician and the senior medical director with WebMD. Dr. Bhargava, really good to have you on here to talk about what I know is such an important topic for so many parents here. You talk to a lot of parents. What are the biggest concerns that parents have about how this is all going to look when their kids do return to school?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot, Alex, about parents' concerns about this, and they are concerned about their kids getting the infection, bringing it home, whether the teachers could be exposed or whether teachers could expose the kids. There are a lot of concerns, especially with the rising numbers of COVID in certain parts of the country.
Okay, so I know that different school districts, and we've heard a lot of school districts here in the Bay Area, rolling out their safety plans to put kids back onto campus, but do it in as safe a way as possible. Some of the keys are obviously going to be trying to have as many students as possible wear masks and trying to have students be as spaced out as you possibly can be, given the fact that you're going to have hundreds of kids back on a school campus. What is it going to look like, and what are the key safety measures that you think need to be in place for reopening schools in a safe way?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I did want to say the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a statement recently, a couple of days ago, about the need for children to go back to school. And I, as a pediatrician and as a parent, strongly support that. And that is because the kids actually need to learn. And what they found with online school is that it just didn't work. I mean, kids are not learning for, various reasons. They may not have the computer, or if they had it, the parent needed to work, or, they just were distracted, or, it was really hard for the schools to deliver the education. So kids are behind, and we can't have American children get further and further behind in their education. So that's one of the big reasons. A couple of other reasons is, mental health. Kids, who aren't socializing or in other groups of kids, or even with the teachers in a structured environment, don't have the ability to socialize. And so we're seeing anxiety and depression as well, Alex. And, the third reason I think you probably know is as a parent, as I do, when you're a parent and you're working, even if you have the privilege of working from home, you don't necessarily have the capacity to also take on teaching when the kids are online. So that's just for people who can work from home. But imagine the parents who actually have to go to work or have essential jobs where they have to be there and live paycheck to paycheck. So for all of those reasons, it really makes sense for the kids to go back to school.
One of the things, and I don't know if you've heard this, but one of the plans that's sort of on the table, it sounds like for some school districts, is to offer an array of options for parents, and it's sort of dependent on the students. So maybe some students are going to come and be back in the classroom 3, 4, maybe even 5 days out of the week. Other students, maybe not as much, sort of depending. And then, of course, you could have the alternating days. How important is it, you think, and you just referred to, again, some of the students whose parents have to be at work, and those students really need to be in that school setting. So you sort of have an array of needs here. And how do you think that school districts are going to balance all of that?
And that's a great question. And I think it's a very difficult task. Look, it's really difficult. A lot of the schools are suffering from not getting enough resources, or they might not, they have different parents' needs to serve, as you're outlining. But I think the schools have been working really hard. And, I myself as a parent got surveys on what I wanted. I know other parents who did as well. Some schools are offering both options, so parents are comfortable. I think the bottom line is that there needs to be a physical option where kids show up in a structured setting. And so I think that most parents, and I would advocate, and I am sending my kids back to school as well, that parents should try to go there. And a couple of the concerns that we talked about earlier, Alex, was that parents are concerned about infection. I just want to point to a couple of studies actually that I was really relieved to read about. And that is like, there's small studies, one's out of Geneva, Switzerland, and the other is from out of China. But essentially the one out of Geneva, Switzerland showed that in fact, when kids went to school in Switzerland, the households that got infected, less than 8% were due to the child bringing home the infection. So what does that mean? That means over 90% of those households did not get infected from the child who went to school. And that gives me some confidence. I know it's a small study and we need more research, but that's great in that that's one of our biggest fears, that is this child going to bring home an infection? Is this child going to, and the answer is that kids don't necessarily spread the infection, and when they get it, it's very, very mild. So if that alleviates some concerns, then that would be great for the kids to go and get the benefits when they're not as much as at risk as you and I.
Yeah, and we've certainly heard that across the board, kids have not been impacted in the same way by coronavirus. Obviously, kids tend to not get as seriously ill as adults if they do contract the virus. But does the research show that they're less likely to transmit it to other kids or adults?
Yeah, and that's the good news. Like these initial small studies, and we'll have more studies, of course, are showing that they're less likely to transmit it, as opposed to what we thought before a few months ago, where we thought that they're going to be asymptomatic and they will spread it. The other area I would point to is also that the CDC reported on, and there was an article recently about childcare centers that remained open for essential healthcare workers.
Right.
And this was over March, April, May in New York. Did you hear about that one, Alex?
I didn't know, but I know that many of them had obviously it stayed open for folks who had to be at work. Yeah. No, I didn't hear what were the results?
Yeah, and so those centers actually were really smart. They did all the precautions, which basically they talked about airplane arms for the 4 and 5-year-olds. They told them to be airplane arms away from other children. They did pods where they had a small group of kids with one teacher, and they only stayed with that one teacher. And of course, hand washing and masks. And what they found was, again, very little risk of infection, very little spread of infection. So that should give us some confidence as parents as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to put a lot of parents a little bit more at ease. All right, so you talked about the airplane arms, and that's interesting because it sort of leads me into my next question, which is, it seems like such an incredible challenge to ask, especially the kids on the younger end of the spectrum. The elementary school age kids, asking them to distance from each other and asking them to wear masks. This seems like it's going to be tough to do. How important is it for parents to sort of reinforce that training and create those good habits before we send our kids back into the school setting?
I totally agree that it's hard, but it's not impossible. So here's what I'm doing for myself. And that is, in the lead up to school time, in the next few weeks or the next month and a half, wherever you are in the country, I would suggest that you start the habits now, because parents actually have control over summertime, right? You can teach kids things over the summer that you don't during the school year. So the rules that I have in my house are, you open the front door, the mask goes on. So masks on, and then when you come in, hands washed. The first thing you do is you go to the bathroom and wash your hands. So, if we could just do those two simple things, and then of course, like, kids basically will learn what parents do. Yeah. So if we do go to the grocery store, we do, go to a small group of people and a barbecue, we stay 6 feet away, and we need to demonstrate that as parents to the children, so that by the time school starts, that's ingrained in their heads. It takes 3 weeks to make a habit. If we have 3 weeks to do it, let's do it.
Yeah, well, that means for a lot of folks, might need to start right now if you haven't been reinforcing the habits, those good habits already. Because yeah, I mean, summer's gonna summer's gonna be over here pretty soon. I'm already looking at our calendar here at our house, and it's gonna be over soon. So kids they're gonna be back, back on campus, but it doesn't sound like they're gonna be. It's not gonna be necessarily school as normal as it was before. What sort of activities do you think are going to be out?
There's definitely going to be restrictions. It's COVID life. So of course there will be probably imposition of masks, and that's really important. The studies are pointing to that more than ever, that we need to be wearing masks, and they do make a difference. The pods are really important, where there's only small groups and assigned to each teacher. There could be hybrid. Some schools are doing hybrid days where they're asking certain grades to come in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and other grades
Yeah.
to come in on Tuesday, Thursday. And of course, there's going to be hand sanitizers and hopefully a push toward, washing your hands a lot and physical distancing. So it's not going to look like before, and activities will be restricted. I mean,
Yeah. What
there's
about like
activities that you
sports and band? I'm just trying to think of some of the things that you normally would see on a school campus.
I think that I would, if I was to give advice, I would probably stick more to solo sports. So, you can run and physically distance. You could potentially play tennis and physically distance. I wouldn't suggest basketball just yet, because that's an indoor sport with a lot of clustering. So, this is not a guideline. These are just my thoughts,
Yeah,
just to,
sure, sure.
in terms of social distancing. But yes, I do think
But
there's
students should
going to
be
be some.
prepared for the fact that maybe some of these sports are probably going to be limited in some way. Yeah, and maybe not the same extracurricular activities that you normally would have, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the important thing is getting them back into that classroom setting, because the other issue here, and I know we've talked about it many times during the pandemic, is that there were so many students. It really came to the forefront, but there were so many students who just lacked access to computers, access to internet, and they were not getting the same level of education as some of their peers during this pandemic, in the online learning model.
Completely agree. Internet is expensive. People may not have devices. So that's the digital divide, what the pediatricians often talk about. And then unfortunately, some kids are also dependent on school meals, and you can't have children hungry. So those are additional benefits in addition to the learning and the socialization for all kids.
All right, so let's wrap up here and talk, a little bit about kind of the what ifs. I mean, it's not the scenario you want to think about, but obviously you can't control everything, and you can't completely stop the spread of this virus. So you are likely to have outbreaks potentially related to a school campus somewhere. How should school districts respond to those, and how ready do you think families should be to kind of pivot from the in-person learning to the online learning once again? We're going to kind of have to be flexible, right?
Absolutely. We need to adapt. This is not normal times. And if there are outbreaks in the school, which could potentially happen, even though we're hopeful that it won't happen, I think the schools may be forced to do online learning for a while. Also, as parents, we need to take responsibility as well. We've talked about this too, that, if your child is sick, don't send them to school. If they have a fever, they don't need to go to school. And that's a rule even before COVID happened, but now especially since COVID-19's happened. So that's really important. And the third way for parents to prepare, and we've talked about this too, Alex, is we've got to get those vaccinations. What we don't want is an additional crisis on top of COVID-19. And that's really going to handicap our nation. So we need to go out there and get our vaccinations. We don't want measles outbreaks on top of COVID infections.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And you, as you say, it's the responsibility of every family to make sure that you're not sending a kid to school who is sick. I mean, we've all done it in the past. You sort of fudge things a little bit, and oh well, he's got a little bit of a cough. He or she has a little bit of a cough. I'm gonna send them to school anyway. This is not the time to mess around with anything. So if you have a sick kid, keep them at home, right?
Yeah, this is about the we. I mean, united we stand, divided we fall. We need to be united and be a community and take our individual responsibility, but also care about the society. So we absolutely have to do that.
All right, but bottom line, Dr. Bhargava, is that you are in favor of
Bottom
getting
line
kids back into classrooms.
is, yeah, the bottom line is school is great for kids, for learning, for mental health, and even for the family, right, where the parents have to work. But also, I will add what we talked about before, and that is let's prepare in the summer. Masks on when they go outside, hands washed when they come back in, and get those vaccinations.
There you go. Teach the good habits now. All right, good. Well, we as parents, I will speak for parents, we are excited / anxious about students returning to class. But as you say, it is definitely important for them to improve the level of learning that's happening. I appreciate you coming on and appreciate your insight on this really important topic that I know is on the minds of so many parents all over. Dr. Hansa Bhargava, pediatrician, senior medical director at WebMD. Always appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk to you next time. And I will let the audience know that we have more information that's up at our website, and that is coronavirusnow.com. I'm Alex Savage from KTVU Fox 2 News in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'll talk to you next time.